Hey, welcome to Song for This Day, and thanks for joining us. If you've been to one of our previous adventures, thanks for coming back. And if this is your first time, well, they say you always remember your first time, so welcome aboard. What we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at 6 degrees of separation. Now, you may be familiar with the term, or you may be familiar with the version of the term that's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. But the deal is, in this scientific study, that there's 6 degrees of separation between all of us in this world. And if you take those 6 degrees, you can find that you're related to everybody in the world. Now, I don't believe that. I think it sounds a little extraordinary, but we're going to take that theory and we're going to do 6 degrees of musical separation. And we're going to go from West Side Story and show you how it's connected to the James Gang. That may sound a little strange to you, but follow along. I think it'll be fun. So we're going to start with West Side Story. West Side Story is one of my favorite Broadway shows and one of my favorite Broadway shows that was turned into a movie musical. Now, just to be correct here, I'm not talking about the Steven Spielberg version in 2021. I love everything that Steven Spielberg did, except that. He really didn't catch my attention with the 2021 version, because it turns out that things were completely out of proportion. And it started with the main characters, Tony and Maria. In Steven Spielberg's version, Tony was played by Ansel Elgort. Ansel happens to be 6'4". Maria was played by, he says checking here, Rachel Zegler, and she's only 5'2". There's a disparity there. And also, I found, at least personally, that there wasn't the chemistry between Tony and Maria that there was in the original West Side Story. There seemed to be more chemistry between Tony and Riff, and that wasn't what the story was about. Anyway, we're going back to 1961, and the movie version that starred Natalie Wood and Richard Beymer. Now, neither of those stars, Natalie or Richard, did their own singing in West Side Story. They were actors, not necessarily singers. And in the movie, Beymer's role was sung by James Howard Bryant. And James Howard Bryant said many times that he thought Richard Beymer was a real gentleman because in interviews he would do while promoting West Side Story, Beymer would recognize Howard as being the singer for him in the movie. So he thought that was a good thing to do, Mr. Bryant. Natalie Wood, as the story goes, wasn't aware that her voice, her vocals, had been replaced and didn't find out until she saw an advanced version of the film and thought, wait, that's not my voice. The voice was Marni Nixon's. Marni Nixon did the vocals for Natalie Wood in West Side Story. Marni Nixon is probably the most famous vocalist that very few people know, because she did West Side Story for Natalie Wood. She also did The King and I for Deborah Carr. She did Audrey Hepburn's vocals in My Fair Lady, Jean Crane in Cheaper by the Dozen, and she dubbed Marilyn Monroe's high notes in Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. In Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she vocalized Ida Lupino. So all of those iconic movies, iconic roles, were actually voiced by Marni Nixon, probably the most famous voice that most people don't even know. West Side Story was nominated for they won 10 Academy Awards. They were nominated for 11. Neither of the stars were nominated for an Academy Award. West Side Story is one of the most awarded films in film history. West Side Story also got 6 Golden Globe Awards, and they won 3. Both of the stars, Natalie Wood and Richard Beymer, were nominated for Golden Globes. They didn't win. Nowhere in either of those organizations did anyone nominate Marni Nixon, or even mention her. And she was, quite obviously, an extremely important factor in the most recognized film by the Academy. So Marni Nixon, she was actually awarded in 2011 the George Peabody Award for Outstanding Contributions in American Music. Kind of late and a little understated, really, in terms of what her contributions actually were. She was married 3 times, and her first husband was Ernest Gold. Ernest was a composer, and he actually was an Academy Award winner himself. And he won an Academy Award for writing all the music for Exodus. And Ernest Gold and Marni Nixon had a son, and they named that son Andrew. And Andrew is our next step in the 6 degrees of separation. Now, Andrew Gold, with the genes that he had, obviously Marni Nixon and Ernest Gold, had some real musical attributes. And his career began as one of the most sought-after session musicians in LA and on the West Coast rock scene. But why? And you say to yourself, why? Well, Andrew Gold played acoustic guitar, electric guitar. He played grand piano. He played synthesizers. He played keyboards. He was a drummer. And he also was an arranger. He played bass guitar as well. So you can see why he would be tapped as a session musician. And in fact, on his big hit single, Lonely Boy, he played everything and arranged it as well. And he also did arrangements for many, many other artists. Well, in 1975, Andrew Gold, he would have been 25 then, he released his first solo album. I don't know about you, but at 25, I wasn't doing anything even remotely close to that. At 25, Andrew Gold released his first solo album. And while he was releasing that, he was also producing Art Garfunkel's first solo album, which included I Only Have Eyes for You, and Andrew Gold played most of the musical instruments on that particular track, and many of the others included on that album. The album called Breakaway. Gold's second studio album, What's Wrong with This Picture, was the title, released in 1976. He would be 26 then, just in terms of accomplishments. And that included the single Lonely Boy. And he says that it was not an autobiographical song. He said he included some autobiographical facts just because it was convenient. He said he had a really nice childhood. He wasn't actually a lonely boy. And Lonely Boy, for me, it has one of the great lyrics of disappointment, where he says, the singer, after the birth of his younger sister, that when they told me I was the only son, I thought they meant I was the only one. Anyway, Andrew went on from that. He wasn't disappointed, actually. As he said, it wasn't autobiographical. And he did an album in 1976 called All This and Heaven Too. And included on that was a throwaway song that he had written. He said he wrote the song in an hour, and it was called Thank You for Being a Friend, which went on to become an international hit for Andrew Gold, and a cover version of it also ran forever on the Golden Girls for their theme song. So Andrew Gold, he worked with many, many people, more than I have on the list here. But just to give you an idea, obviously he worked with Art Garfunkel. He worked with James Taylor, Stephen Bishop, Eric Carmen, Nicolette Larson, America, the group. But sadly, on June 3rd, 2011, Andrew Gold passed away in his sleep from a heart attack at the very young age of 59. But let's go back to Andrew Gold's early career, where he was in a band with a gentleman by the name of Kenny Edwards. The band was called Brindle, but Kenny Edwards had been in a band before that. And that band was called the Stone Ponies. So Edwards, he was the founder of that trio, the Stone Ponies, and it was really patterned after the very, very successful Peter, Paul, and Mary, with the intent being to trade on the folk success. Unfortunately, the folk market, in terms of music, was beginning to dissipate, and the interest in it was very fleeting at that moment. So they were looking for a song that would deliver for them a hit. And they ran into a song that was recorded by the Greenbrier Boys. It was a song called Different Drum, and it was written by future Monkee Michael Nesmith. And they recorded it, and it was a big hit. It was a top 20 hit for the Stone Ponies. Now, let me just take a moment here and talk about the Monkees. Not that they're in our 6 degrees, they're off to the side a little bit, or they're off to this side a little bit. But they're a frequently derided group because the critics said they didn't write their own music, they didn't play their own instruments, they had session musicians when they recorded them. Why should we pay attention to them? However, the Monkees, they recorded 14 albums and had 8 top 20 hits and 4 number 1 hits. That's impressive. Now let's look on the other side of the spectrum, the creative side of the music spectrum. And we'll do the quotes here. The creative side, the Byrds. Now the Byrds, when they recorded their first albums, it included music that was written by, not them, but by Bob Dylan and Pete Seeger. And the only Byrd that played on any of their early recordings was Roger McGuinn. The rest, just like the Monkees, were session musicians in LA. So I ask you, the Byrds, they're in the mysterious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Monkees, there's no chance they're ever going to go in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But let's get back to Kenny Edwards and the Stone Ponies. After they had recorded A Different Drum, that was pretty much the end of the Stone Ponies. Their lead singer, Linda Ronstadt, well, she decided that she was going to go off on her own. And Kenny Edwards, he would stay with her and work with her on producing and touring. And in addition to that, he would also do a tremendous amount of session work. He worked with artists like Emmylou Harris, Stevie Nicks, J.D. Souther, Don Henley, Brian Wilson, Warren Zevon, Art Garfunkel, Vince Gill, Jennifer Warnes, Denny Korchmar, Lowell George, well, pretty much everyone, because he was a talented musician, producer, and arranger. He also is a prolific songwriter with 235 published and copyrighted titles. He wrote music for a lot of TV shows like Crime Story, The Street, The Sins of Our Father, and others that he has credits for. So he's not a household name, Kenny Edwards, except in the music industry, because he played a very influential part in the music of the 70s and helped to create that category known as folk rock. He'd leave us in 2010, but his connection, quite obviously, in our next degree of separation, is Linda Ronstadt. Okay, I'm a contemporary of Linda Ronstadt's, and I have to say, growing up, I had a major crush on Linda Ronstadt, like most other males my age at that point, which is interesting because she wasn't beautiful, but oh my gosh, she was attractive. Look at her. She wasn't sexy, but there was something about her that was inherently sexy. Linda Ronstadt was the complete commercial musical package. She had an amazing voice. She had an amazing range. And she had the sultry looks of the girl next door. In her first band, the Stone Ponies, Linda said that when they were in LA trying to get recognized, the place to be was the Troubadour, where all the musicians hung out, hoping to get a chance to play at the Hootenanny night. And all the music executives were there, and they hoped to find the next big star. And so they were hoping to get their shot. And she said while she was there, she encountered a lot of bands that were on there up and coming. The aforementioned Byrds were one that she mentioned at the Troubadour. And she also mentioned this group that she saw, and she thought, wow, these guys are really good. But what they need to do is get rid of that lead singer. The band was the Doors. They didn't get rid of the lead singer, and it worked out okay for them. And Linda thought, well, okay, I didn't get that one right. So it wouldn't be until 1971, 4 years after the debut of A Different Drum, that Linda Ronstadt's self-titled album would become the pivotal point in her career. And it featured a group of session musicians who would turn her growing attraction to this folk rock category that she was very, very intrinsic in terms of starting and intensifying. And the album had songs from songwriters like Jackson Browne, Neil Young, and Eric Anderson. But it was her next album in 1974, Heart Like a Wheel, that made Linda Ronstadt a star. It included hits like You're No Good, When Will I Be Loved, and It Doesn't Matter Anymore. And Heart Like a Wheel reached #1 and sold over 2 million copies, which was a ton of copies back in the day. She was also a great finder of songwriting talent. She initially sang songs by people like Neil Young, Carla Banoff, Eric Anderson, and Jackson Browne, and introduced the world to them among many others. For all of her vocal talents, Linda Ronstadt was not a songwriter, but she had the ability to recognize a song that she could sing and raise the level of that song and make it a hit. And she also introduced us to a lot of songwriters, people like Elvis Costello, Warren Zevon, and Jackson Browne. J.D. Souther was another one that she introduced us to as well. Here's some things that you actually may not know about Linda Ronstadt. Linda has 11 Grammys and a Lifetime Achievement Award as well. She has a National Medal of Arts, and her accolades cover genres like pop, rock, Latin, operetta, everything, even some country hits. In the 70s, Linda Ronstadt was the highest paid female artist, and she toured with a band that she ran. She was a woman who ran a band comprised of all male musicians, which was remarkable at the time and hard to actually kind of fathom when you look back and think about it. In the early 1980s, Linda Ronstadt said, I need to change. I need to do something different. I've been singing these songs forever and ever. She also said that she regretted in many instances the kind of context of the way her career ran. She would go into the studio and she would record songs. And then they'd take that album out and they'd tour it. And she said by the time they would get to the middle and the end of the tour, she would have those songs perfect, exactly the way she wanted them. And then when she would go back and listen to the album, she would say, I hate that. I wish I could have done it the way I had finished it up on the tour. And thought, why don't we reverse that? Why don't I tour the album and then record the album? But that never happened. But she decided she needed a change from all of that, from the touring, from the recording, from the songs, pop hits, the demands by the record company. And so she thought she would do an operetta. The Pirates of Penzance, a Gilbert and Sullivan classic that was being produced by Joseph Papp in New York. She auditioned for the part. I'm sure it didn't matter that she was Linda Ronstadt auditioning, and she got the part. So she was now on her way to being an operetta singer, and her record label, her friends, and many other folks said, don't do this. It will destroy your career. You're taking it too far afield, and people are not going to like it. So Kevin Kline, who co-starred in this with her, he said there was a circle of all of the singers at the very beginning of the production where they would talk through the lines, they would sing the lines, and they would all get a sense of how this sounded and how it would work in between. And he was familiar with Linda Ronstadt's work, obviously. She was a huge pop star. But he said he couldn't believe the purity of her voice. He said it was phenomenal. Anyway, she went on against the good advice of her record label and her friends, and she did the Pirates of Penzance. And she was nominated for an Emmy for that. So Sadly, with all that in the background, an amazing voice, an amazing career, skills in the studio, her operatic contributions with the Pirates of Penzance, and a lot of work that she did with so many, many other artists like Emmylou Harris and Dolly Parton. Things that are all recorded and left for us to enjoy and appreciate forever and ever. But sadly, Linda Ronstadt has Parkinson's, and it has eliminated her ability to control her voice. So she no longer sings. But for our needs, in terms of our 6 degrees of separation, as a solo artist in the 70s, Linda Ronstadt recruited a touring band, which is comprised of Glenn Frey, Don Henley, Randy Meisner, and Bernie Leadon. And they would go on to form their own band. And that is our next step in the 6 degrees of separation. The Eagles. We all know and love the Eagles. They have a huge catalog. It goes on and on forever. But the band was always rife with disputes, disagreements, and creative conflicts. They broke up at a point when Don Henley and Glenn Frey weren't talking to each other. And when Henley was asked, when will the band get back together, he said, when hell freezes over. Actually, before the Eagles broke up, Bernie Leadon decided to leave the band. And in an exclamation to let him know how serious he was, he dumped a beer over Glenn Frey's head to let him know he was done, and then he left. Glenn Frey also had a little conflict with Don Felder. They had a disagreement before they were doing a concert, a serious one. And on stage, in the middle of the performance, Frey turned to Leadon, to Felder, and he said, in 3 more songs, I'm going to kick your ass. And they didn't speak for years after that. He left the group as well, too. So they are one of the most successful bands in rock music. And when Leadon left, he was replaced by Joe Walsh. And Joe is our last connection in the 6 degrees of separation, because Joe was one of the original members of the James Gang. And we're not talking about Frank and Jesse, obviously. We're talking about the group, the James Gang. And we'll all remember them because they delivered to us Funk 49. And we all can hear that guitar riff right away as soon as you say that. Funk 49, a big hit. And they were a power trio that a lot of people think were overlooked in the 70s because of their influence or lack of recognition for their influence in funk and pop rock. They kind of followed the emergence of Cream and the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And interestingly, before Funk 49, they had a song on their first album that was called, what do you think? Yep, Funk 48. And there's actually a Funk 50. Because Joe Walsh, later in his career, his solo career, was contacted by ESPN. And they said, we need a minute's worth of music. We love the James Gang. We love Funk 49. Give us something like Funk 49. So he recorded Funk 50. Joe Walsh. He's an interesting guy. He's had a lot of solo albums. He has a very interesting sense of humor. And just imagining from the titles of his albums, The Smoker You Get, The Drinker You Are. I said that right. That's the title. Trouble in the Neighborhood. How about that one? Or maybe You Can't Argue with a Sick Mind. An incredible guitarist, a remarkable vocalist, and a session musician who's played with everyone. But we're going to end our mission here with Joe Walsh because he spent the last 50 years, in addition to doing his session work and solo albums, with that group known as the Eagles. So, as promised, we discovered that West Side Story is indeed related to the James Gang. Starting with Marni Nixon, who voiced Natalie Wood's singing in West Side Story, and then Marni Nixon's son, Andrew Gold, who would write, sing, and produce songs, as well as form the group Brindle with Kenny Edwards, and Kenny Edwards would then, who had previously formed the band the Stone Ponies with Linda Ronstadt, and then Linda Ronstadt, of course, with her backing band being the Eagles, and then the Eagles having recruited Joe Walsh from the James Gang. So there you have it. West Side Story, It's a Funk 49 in 6 easy steps. So, thanks for riding along. I hope you enjoyed that. I had a good time. I hope you did too. And I do a daily blog, goes out, music blog, every morning, bright and early, and it contains a song and the lyrics and a bit of information like we've done here, only in a condensed form on each song. And it's free. It's completely free. If you would like to get a daily song to start your day off on a musical note, simply send me your email address to songforthisday@gmail.com. In the meantime, I'm Ed Walsh, and you've been listening to Song for This Day. And thanks for riding along. Hope you enjoyed it. Come back for some more adventures. Check out the previous ones. And in the meantime, happy trails until we meet again.